The boutique on Madison Avenue glittered like a jewel box. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm light onto marble floors, and glass shelves displayed handbags with price tags that could pay a month's rent in the city. The air carried a faint scent of vanilla and polished leather, the olfactory signature of luxury. Danielle Carter stepped inside quietly, her sneakers barely scuffing the floor. She wore an oversized navy coat, a pair of worn jeans, and a simple wool beanie pulled low over her braided hair. In one hand, she carried a small canvas tote. In the other, her phone, still open to an email draft she'd been working on during the cab ride over. To any casual observer, Danielle looked like just another New Yorker sheltering from the winter chill. But to the clerk behind the counter, a tall, immaculately groomed young man named Trevor, she looked like someone who didn't belong. Trevor's eyes flicked up and down her frame. He put on a professional smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Can I help you?" His tone carried an edge, as though the offer were more of a warning. Danielle glanced around the boutique. "Just browsing," she said evenly, stepping toward a display of handbags. Trevor subtly shifted his position to keep her in view. Every time Danielle's fingers brushed a bag, or her gaze lingered on a display, he moved closer, his smile tightening. When Danielle reached for a deep burgundy tote, Trevor cleared his throat. "Those are quite expensive," he said, his voice low but pointed. Danielle raised an eyebrow. "I assumed so. It is a luxury store, isn't it?" Rather than answering, Trevor glanced toward a security guard stationed near the door and gave the faintest nod. Moments later, the guard approached. "Ma'am," the guard said, his voice neutral but firm, "I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the merchandise, unless you're ready to purchase something." Danielle froze. The murmur of another shopper flipping through scarves at the far end of the boutique became deafening in the sudden silence. "Excuse me?" Trevor's tone was now laced with condescension. "We've had incidents before. Just policy." It wasn't a shout, it wasn't a scene, but the sting was the same. Danielle felt heat rise in her chest. She set the bag back on its stand with deliberate care. "Understood," she said softly, her voice calm in a way that made Trevor blink. "I won't keep you from your policies." She walked out without another word, the chime above the boutique door ringing behind her. Neither Trevor nor the guard could have guessed that within 24 hours, the woman they'd just shooed away would walk back through that same door, not as a customer, but as their boss. Danielle stepped out of the boutique into the bite of a February wind, her breath coming in visible puffs. She crossed the street and ducked into a quiet corner cafe, a warm refuge of exposed brick walls and the smell of fresh espresso. Sliding into a corner table, she pulled off her beanie and shook her braids loose. Her phone screen was still lit up from the draft she'd been working on earlier, an internal memo to the global leadership team of Maison Levant, the French luxury fashion house that owned the boutique she had just been in. She reread the opening lines. "To all senior regional managers, store leads, and department heads. I'm thrilled to be joining Maison Levant as the new global creative director. I look forward to visiting each flagship location over the next month to understand our customers, our team, and our opportunities for growth." The irony wasn't lost on her. Her very first unofficial store visit had turned into a front-row example of exactly the kind of cultural problem she intended to change. She opened a new note on her phone and typed quickly, "Flagship Madison. Staff training needed. Customer experience fails when bias overrides service." As she typed, her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Madison Flagship Team. Introduction." She smiled faintly. That meant Trevor and the security guard would be there. She could already imagine the look on their faces. Danielle had worked too hard to get here, rising from a young, self-taught designer in Atlanta to running her own boutique, to consulting for international fashion houses. When Maison Levant approached her about leading their global creative vision, she'd accepted with one condition. She'd have full authority, not just over design, but over the culture in every store. The Madison Avenue flagship, she decided, would be the perfect place to start. She closed her laptop and sipped her coffee slowly, picturing tomorrow's meeting. The same chandeliers, the same marble floors, but this time, she wouldn't be on the receiving end of scrutiny. Tomorrow, she'd be setting the tone. The next morning, Madison Avenue glistened under a thin layer of frost. Inside the boutique, Trevor was busy arranging a display of silk scarves when the store manager, a sharp-dressed woman named Clarice, clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "All right, team," Clarice said briskly. "We've been asked to gather for an important introduction. Corporate is here." The security guard from yesterday, still wearing the same rigid posture, glanced toward Trevor with a curious raise of his brow. Trevor smirked faintly. Introductions usually meant some middle management type, in a suit, giving a speech and leaving. The front door chimed. In stepped Danielle. This time, she wore a sleek black wrap dress under a long camel coat, a pair of heeled boots clicking against the marble floor. Her hair was styled neatly, and a leather portfolio was tucked under her arm. Trevor's smirk faltered. The guard's eyes widened slightly. Clarice stepped forward, smiling warmly. "Team, please welcome Danielle Carter, Maison Levant's new global creative director." The room shifted. Sales associates straightened their posture. The chatter died instantly, and Trevor felt the blood drain from his face. Danielle gave a polite nod to the group, her voice calm but confident. "Good morning. I wanted my first week here to be spent in our stores, seeing our work through both the eyes of our team and our customers. That's why I'm here in person, to get a real sense of the experience." Her gaze swept the room, and for the briefest moment, lingered on Trevor and the security guard. Not long enough for anyone else to notice, but enough to send a quiet jolt through them both. Clarisse gestured toward the seating area by the main display. "We'll have a quick walkthrough with Danielle, then she'll share some of her vision for the season." Danielle smiled faintly. "Yes, but before that, I'd like to hear from all of you. Your thoughts, your challenges, what's working and what's not." She set her portfolio down and clasped her hands. "We're going to build something here together, but it starts with honesty." Trevor shifted uncomfortably. Yesterday's interaction was replaying in his mind, now tinged with the realization of exactly who he had spoken to, like an unwelcome guest. The day had only just begun, but Danielle knew she had the room's full attention, and for some, a lot more than that. Clarisse led the group through the boutique, but Danielle didn't trail behind passively. She moved with intent. Every step seemed to echo off the marble floor as she approached each display, running her hand lightly over the glass cases, pausing to examine arrangements. This handbag display," Danielle said, stopping in front of the exact spot where Trevor had confronted her the day before. "Who's responsible for this setup?" Trevor's stomach tightened. That would be me," he said, his voice quieter than usual. Danielle gave a professional nod. "It's well organized, but tell me, how do you normally approach a customer who comes to look at these?" The air seemed to grow heavier. Trevor hesitated. "I assess what they might be looking for and offer assistance." Danielle tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Do you approach everyone the same way?" His mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence stretched just long enough for the others to sense there was more behind her question. She turned to the rest of the staff. "The way we greet someone, the tone we use, the space we give them, all of that tells a story about who we think they are and how much we value them. In luxury retail, every customer should feel as if they belong here the moment they step through that door." Her eyes swept briefly to the security guard, who was keeping perfectly still by the entrance. Danielle moved on, stopping at the accessories counter. "Luxury is not just a product," she continued, her voice steady. "It's an experience shaped by respect, warmth, and the absence of bias." The rest of the tour was a masterclass in subtle but pointed teaching. Danielle never raised her voice, never directly recounted the previous day, but every example, every comment, was a mirror held up to the incident without naming it. By the time they returned to the seating area, Trevor could feel sweat prickling under his collar. The walkthrough had been for the whole team, but it had also been for him. Once the walkthrough concluded, Clarisse dismissed the staff for a short break. Associates scattered toward the back office or the small kitchenette tucked behind the sales floor, grateful for a few minutes to breathe. But Danielle didn't follow the others. She remained in the seating area, flipping open her portfolio and jotting a few notes. Then, without looking up, she said quietly, "Trevor, could you join me for a moment?" "You too, Officer Reynolds." The words landed like a weight. Trevor and the security guard exchanged a glance before making their way toward her, both visibly tense. Danielle closed the portfolio and met their eyes one at a time. "Yesterday, I came into this store unannounced. No appointment, No entourage. I wanted to see how a customer, any customer, would be treated. Trevor's face flushed. Reynolds shifted his stance uncomfortably. I'm sure you remember what happened, Danielle continued, her voice calm but unwavering. Before I'd even had a chance to properly look around, I was followed, questioned, and made to feel like a potential criminal. Why do you think that was? Trevor swallowed. I, I thought that I couldn't afford to be here? That I didn't fit the image of your typical client? She didn't raise her voice, but the firmness in her tone made it impossible to hide behind half answers. Reynolds stepped in. We were just following policy. Danielle turned to him. Policy is meant to protect our business, yes. But when it's applied with bias, even unconsciously, it doesn't protect. It alienates. It damages the very brand you're here to serve. Silence followed. Neither man could meet her eyes. I'm not here to punish, Danielle finally said, but I am here to change this culture. That starts with you both acknowledging that what happened yesterday was wrong, and that it can't happen again. Not to me, not to anyone. Trevor's voice was quiet. You're right. I'm sorry. Reynolds nodded stiffly. Understood. Danielle studied them for a moment longer, then opened her portfolio again. Good. Now we move forward. Because tomorrow, the next person who walks through that door might be a customer who spends more here in one visit than most people make in a year, and you won't see it coming. Your job is to treat everyone as if they already belong. She dismissed them with a polite nod, leaving Trevor and Reynolds to retreat toward the back, each wearing the heavy realization of just how badly they'd misjudged her. By mid-morning, the boutique's doors had opened to a steady stream of customers. Elegantly dressed women trying on heels, businessmen browsing watches, and tourists admiring the gleaming window displays. Clarice gathered the staff once again near the center of the sales floor. Danielle stood beside her, calm but commanding, her presence drawing the attention of not just the employees, but curious shoppers lingering nearby. Clarice began. Everyone, as you know, Danielle Carter has joined Maison Levant as our new global creative director. Today, she'd like to share her vision for our brand moving forward. Danielle stepped forward. She didn't pull out notes. She didn't need them. When people think of Maison Levant, she began, her voice carrying easily through the boutique, they think of craftsmanship, elegance, luxury. But I believe true luxury is more than fine materials and perfect stitching. True luxury is how we make people feel the moment they step inside. She let her gaze sweep across the room, catching Trevor's eye briefly, then Reynolds. Inclusivity and respect are not just good values, they are good business. A customer's worth is not measured by the clothes they wear when they walk in. We don't know their story, but it is our responsibility to make sure they feel welcomed into ours. Several staff members nodded. A woman folding scarves near the register paused, clearly taking in every word. Starting this week, Danielle continued, we will implement a training program across all flagship stores, focusing on customer experience, cultural sensitivity, and the removal of bias from our interactions. Our goal is simple. Every client, whether they're here to browse or to buy, leaves feeling valued. A smattering of quiet applause began among the staff, joined by a few impressed murmurs from nearby customers. Danielle smiled faintly. Our products are works of art. But remember, the first thing a customer experiences here isn't a handbag or a dress. It's you. Let's make sure that first impression is worthy of the Maison Levant name. The short speech ended to a warm round of applause. Even Trevor clapped, albeit hesitantly, while Reynolds shifted his weight and nodded once. Danielle knew the transformation wouldn't happen overnight, but the seed had been planted, and for some, it was already taking root. Late in the afternoon, the boutique had settled into a quieter rhythm. The morning rush was over, and only a few customers milled about, sipping champagne while browsing the latest arrivals. Danielle had been in meetings upstairs for most of the day, reviewing design mock-ups and finalizing the upcoming campaign. As she descended the grand staircase back to the sales floor, she decided to test the waters one last time. She slipped out the front door and took a short walk around the block. The winter air bit at her cheeks as she tugged her coat tighter. When she returned, She approached the boutique as though she were any other passerby, slowing her pace to glance in the window before stepping inside. The chime rang. Trevor was at the front counter, reorganizing a jewelry case. This time, when his eyes landed on her, there was no suspicion, no tight-lipped smirk. Instead, he straightened and greeted her with a warm, professional smile. "Good afternoon, Ms. Carter," he said, his tone respectful but not stiff. "Welcome back. Can I offer you a look at our new arrivals?" Danielle smiled. "Just browsing," she replied, echoing her words from the day before. But now, the air between them was entirely different. As she moved through the store, Reynolds nodded politely from his post by the door. No following her steps, no measuring her movements. Just quiet acknowledgement. Danielle stopped at the same burgundy tote from yesterday, lifted it gently, and examined the stitching. Trevor approached, not hovering, but ready to answer questions. "That's one of our best pieces this season," he offered. "It's beautiful," she said, setting it down with the same care as before. She made a slow loop of the boutique, then returned to the entrance. Turning back to Trevor and Reynolds, she gave a small, approving nod. "Better," she said simply, before stepping out into the cold evening air. The message was clear. The lesson had been learned. As the boutique door closed behind her, Danielle felt a quiet satisfaction. Change wouldn't happen in a single day, but today had been a start, not just for Madison Avenue, but for the culture she intended to shape across the entire brand.